How's it going, guys? My name's Wilson. Not all number one seeds in the NBA have had successful playoff runs. Even having 5 occasions of being upsetted by the 8th seed, some teams just win a lot in the regular season, but simply don't get it done in the playoffs, especially when they're not as talented. Over the last 20 years, the West has been significantly better than the East. So let's take a look at the 5 worst number one seeds in the 2010s decade. Number 5, the 2011-2012 Chicago Bulls. In the shortened lockout year, the defensive grinded Bulls came off a conference finals appearance, winning 62 games the season before, pretty much had the same exact team. Rookie Jimmy Butler was selected 30th overall and barely played, averaged just 2.6 points. With high expectations, the player style was perfect for Coach Tibbs' defensive system. The lineup consists of MVP roles Ronnie Brewer, Luol Deng, 31-year-old Carlos Boozer, and Joakim Noah. 33-year-old Rip Hamilton, Kyle Korver, Taj Gibson, CJ Watson, John Lucas III, and Amir Acid came off the bench. Having a deep team, going 50-16 overall, equivalent to a 62-20 record in an 82-game season, despite the MVP missing 27 games due to a multitude of injuries, that's more than 1/3 of the seasons he's missed, and still finished 4 full games better than Miami, where the Heat knocked them off in the conference finals in 5 the year before. Outside of Rose, nobody on the team averaged more than 16 points, but Deng did become a first-time All-Star. Come playoff time, the one moment everybody remembers, late game 1, with the game already decided, Tibbs left his superstar in the game, and then the devastating injury happened. One of the most heartbreaking gut punches in NBA history, ruining the whole franchise. Nobody mentions this Bulls team was the 5th number one seed to be eliminated by the 8th seeded Sixers. Since the injury was so painful, it wasn't much of a surprise. Chi-Town was helpless without their MVP. Philly had no business being in the playoffs that year. Having 21-year-old Drew Holiday wasn't as established. 25-year-old Lou Williams, Andre Iguodala, and Evan Turner, none of them averaged more than 15 a game. After scoring 103 in game 1, Chicago was held to under 81 points the next 5 games. Noah got hurt in game 3, out the rest of the series. Carlos Boozer went a pathetic 1 of 11 from the field in game 6, scoring just 3 points. Nobody can generate any offense whatsoever. Even if Rose was healthy, with the inconsistent offense of the supporting cast, I believe Miami or Boston that year would have beaten the 2012 Bulls in 5 or 6. Number 4, the 2017-18 Toronto Raptors, because Kawhi Leonard carried the whole country on his shoulder in 2019. Toronto was one of the most disappointing teams for years, with many brutal playoff failures. The 2018 team was the best it's been in the regular season, posted a franchise best 59 wins. The lineup consists of all-star backcourt Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan, 16 and 23-point averages, OG Anunoby at the 3, the front line of Serge Ibaka and Jonas Valanciunas, with Pascal Siakam putting up less than 8 a game, Norman Powell, Fred VanVleet, and CJ Miles off the bench. Despite their success in the regular season, nobody took them seriously. Dwayne Casey went on to win Coach of the Year, was fired after the playoffs. Before the NBA announced the award, a very awkward moment. The team had more hype and expectations than any other past seasons. Knocked off the 8th-seeded Wizards in 6, many believe it could be the year they finally get past LeBron. Had the lead for much of game 1 against the Cavs before collapsing, missing easy shots at the rim, left for 47 minutes 17 seconds in regulation, but failed to capitalize, losing by 1 in OT. The whole team was mentally destroyed, got physically destroyed by LeBron the next 3 games, being swept in the semis. Before making history after trading for Kawhi Leonard, the franchise was on the wrong side of history, being the only number one seed in NBA history to get swept prior to the conference finals, since the format was adopted in 1971. An embarrassing way to go out. The team thought about breaking up and rebuilding, knowing they can't win with DeRozan as the main guy. LeBron almost single-handedly outscored Toronto's starting backcourt by himself that series. Thankfully, Kawhi Leonard was the guy who did the unthinkable, erasing the painful memories. Before the trade, many thought the franchise would be irrelevant for many years. Number 3, the 2013-14 Indiana Pacers, going 56-26 overall. The team was supposed to be up and coming and seemed to have taken a huge step from making the conference finals the year before, taking the defending champion Miami Heat to 7 games. Paul George took a huge leap and was talked about as a superstar. The stars of George Hill, Lance Stevenson, PG, David West, and Roy Hibbert should be good enough to contend for a title. Off the bench was CJ Watson, Luis Scola, and the weird additions of Andrew Bynum, Evan Turner, and LaVoy Allen, who didn't help the team at all. The biggest mistake was trading away Danny Granger. After starting out on fire to start the season at 9-0, then going 20-3, Indy was by far the best team in the East the beginning of the season. Where Miami got a little weak weaker with their lack of depth, on pace to winning 66 games. After a 33-7 record, nobody was likely catching them in the East, and the real blow, according to David West, on February 20th, the team shifted veteran Danny Granger to Philly, who was slowed down by injuries. Wasn't as good as he used to be, but he was the leader of the team, who helped develop PG and all the young guys. Afterwards, the team simply had no leadership presence, and Roy Hibbert lost all confidence in his game, fell off as quick as a blink of an eye. The team knew right then and there they weren't going to get past Miami, was mediocre, going 16-14 after the All-Star break, having the second worst offense in the entire league. Their defense fell out the top 10 after being the best defensive team for the first half of the season. The presence of Granger being around the team was badly needed. Evan Turner was inefficient, and Andrew Bynum's presence, despite playing only 2 games, drew off Hibbert. After his arrival, Hibbert just averaged 9 points, 5 rebounds, and 2 blocks the rest of the season. The locker room chaos was at an all-time high. Lance Stephenson's confidence was also shaking. Seeing a guy like Turner, who was the second pick in the 2010 draft, backing up a guy who was playing in the same position, was the 40th pick. The two simply couldn't focus next to each other. Knowing they're basically the same player, the last 5 minutes of practice before the playoffs, David West had to break up the two men grabbing each other by the neck after a heated argument. Struggling their way to the postseason against the 8-seeded 38-win Hawks, Indy of course lost Game 1, also lost Games 3 and 5. Roy Hibbert was an absolute travesty in that series. After being named an All-Star a few months ago, he was scoreless in Games 5 and 6, averaged a pathetic 5.3 points, 3.7 rebounds on 37% shooting, looked even worse than Kwame Brown. The team was pretty much doomed in Game 6, but David West led the comeback with 24 points. Indy ended the game on a 16-4 run, eventually winning in 7 to avoid a huge upset, knocked off a less talented Wizards team in 6, faced off a 54-win Heat team in the conference finals, was no match, losing by double digits all 3 road games, eliminated in 6. Stevenson of course was out the door, signed with the Hornets in free agency. PG went down that summer for Team USA. The whole year for the franchise ended on very bad terms. Number 2, the 2014-15 Atlanta Hawks. Going 60-22 overall, one can make the case they're the worst 60-win team in NBA history, with the starters of Jeff Teague, Kyle Korver, DeMarre Carroll, Paul Millsap, and Al Horford solid, made a 22 games improvement from the year before, the same exact team who lost to Indy in the first round. Dennis Schroeder, Mike Scott, Pero Antic, Thabo Sefolosha, and Ken Bazemore were some of the guys off the bench. On paper, this team would have gotten beat by almost any playoff team in the West. Coach Bud's offense deserves a lot of credit for making the best of his roster, even looking better than Golden State at times. The team went undefeated the month of January. All the starters but Carroll made the All-Star team. Realistically, likely none of them would have been All-Stars in the West. None of the players averaged more than 17 a game. Millsap was the leading scorer, putting up 16.7 points. Teague and Horford under 16, achieving the best regular season record in franchise history, even better than all of the Dominique Wilkins years. Had a 19-game win streak at one point. Entering the playoffs, the team knocked off the 8-seeded Nets in 6, which was winnable for Brooklyn if Darren Williams wasn't so awful in Games 2 and 5, and luckily escaped the Wizards, which the Hawks won by very close, Games 5 and 6 by 1 possession. Washington would have most likely won if Wall was healthy, and the conference finals would finally prove the Hawks to be very vulnerable. Not only did the Cavs not have Kevin Love, but Kyrie only played limited minutes for 2 games. Dealing with injury, Atlanta got destroyed, outplayed, and folded under pressure. LeBron torched them every game. J.R. Smith had 28 in Game 1, was pretty much the second best player in that series. DeMarre Carroll was banged up. Korver was out after Game 2 with an ankle injury. Horford was ejected in Game 3 after being frustrated by Matthew Dellavedova. The team shot under 24% from 3 in the 4 games, with 2 of their 5 worst shooting percentages of the season coming from the series alone, ended their season getting blown out by 30 in the 4th game. Number 1, the 2016-17 Boston Celtics. Many believe this was the worst number 1 seed in NBA history, going 53-29 overall. Even before the playoffs started, everyone talked about how overrated this team was, and it was all Brad Stevens' coaching genius, where the success over 82 games was overlooked. Isaiah Thomas was an MVP candidate, putting up nearly 30 a game, and was unstoppable at times in the regular season. the team was never viewed as contenders, and nobody gave them a chance to win the East. With the starters of IT, Avery Bradley, Jay Crowder, Al Horford, and Amir Johnson at best very average. They did have Marcus Smart, Kelly Olynyk, rookie Jaylen Brown, and young Terry Rozier off the bench. Many saw a first-round upset in the hands of the 8-seeded Bulls, who stole the first two in Boston. Then Rondo suffered a broken thumb, forcing him to miss the rest of the series. The Bulls had 35-year-old Dwayne Wade and a solid Jimmy Butler, but was dysfunctional, so the C's won the next 4 games. Isaiah Thomas went off to knock off the Wizards in 7, including a 53-point performance in Game 2. But in the conference finals, they met LeBron's Cavs in the East, who coasted through the regular season and basically took the last month and a half off. When the series took off, the Cavs obliterated, destroyed, abused, humiliated, and embarrassed the Celtics in every way imaginable. LeBron torched them with 38 easy points in a 13-point Game 1 win, but Game 2 was the biggest Boston massacre of them all. Cleveland couldn't miss a shot, led by as many as 50 points, set a new playoff record, leading by 41 at halftime, 72-31. A 130-86 domination. The worst margin of defeat for the C's at a home playoff game, the worst defeat suffered by a number 1 seed ever in playoff history. James was a plus 46, the highest of any game of his career. IT only had 2 points, was out with a hip injury the rest of the series. Despite Boston winning Game 3 in overtime, they were ran out the gym in Games 4 and 5, losing by 13 and 33. Having no business being in the conference finals, Cleveland outscored Boston by a combined 100 points in the 5 games, triple digits. The 8th seed in the West that year, the Portland Trailblazers, would have easily beaten the Celtics. Outside of LeBron, that's how weak the East was. All these teams were way weaker than any number 1 seeds in the West, including the 2011 Spurs, who lost to the 8-seeded Grizzlies, but that Memphis team won 46 games in the regular season, would have also beaten any of these 5 teams on the list very badly. Who do you guys think was the worst number 1 seed this decade? Let me know in the comments below. I love all of you. See you next time.